South of Life, I think, along with Jess. So today we're going to a little bit of stuff that goes on. So our fruit and nut group we have community orchards around, and they're maintained and looked after by a group of volunteers. So there's likely to be one not too far away from you in South Invercargill. Right? So Jess, are there details how people can become involved somewhere?
Yep, they just put to me.
Good, all right. So, and that's part of mixing with other people with a common interest and actually learning off each other, which is a pretty good thing. So we find that the people who are involved in that help each other in their gardens too. So it's quite a good thing. It's a nice way to give back to the community. So my background, I currently look after, my job now is I'm the CE for Habitat for Humanity in Southland, so I look after that. I have a background in commercial horticulture for far too long, on large commercial operations right across the Southern Hemisphere, South America, Australia and in New Zealand. So I'm used to growing things, and in learning and growing things you actually make a whole lot of mistakes. All right? Just don't do them twice. So the purpose of summer pruning is so that we are creating light in the tree so that our fruit ripens. All right? That's one thing. We're also getting rid of growth or removing growth that we actually don't want in the tree. Okay? Now it's different from winter pruning, whereas we can make large structural cuts, cuts 25 mil and bigger during winter when the trees are dormant. All right? So if we think about it, you're going to be on the wrong side. Swap sides.
Close up.
It's got a filter that actually is right. So if we look at a tree, all right, and we'll take it that there's always a bud there, all right. We'll take it that in roots in the ground, all right. So we'll take it that when the tree is actively growing, the sap flows up through the tree, and then we end up with growth, and that's the cycle of growing. In winter, or in autumn, all of this starts flowing down again and being stored into buds, right, and back into the tree. Okay, so that is why we prune in dormancy in winter. Right? So that in winter when they're dormant, there's no sap flow. Okay, so if you're cutting when the sap is flowing, right, you're going to initiate growth, right, generally. Right, so if you make a cut, the chances are that you'll have growth come away from that area. All right, so it will force growth out of there. All right, so we try very hard not to remove anything during the growing period unless we want that growth. Okay, does that make sense? Cool. So in winter we may have cut and trimmed and done things like this in the tree. Okay. Now, normally when you cut something, even in winter, you will initiate some growth. Summer pruning is about selecting which of that growth, because there's likely to be 2 or 3, if you want growth there. Right? So if you want your, say the branch was going like this and then it drooped over and you remove the bit that was hanging down in winter, right? You're likely to have initiated growth behind that cut. I'll show you on the trees when we get there. Okay. Branch comes out, starts drooping because it's had fruit on it, and it'll have other bits and pieces like this. If you cut here, right, normally to a growth, you're going to initiate growth behind that. Okay? All right? It is about selecting which ones of these you want to keep for the structure of the tree. Okay. Make sense?
Yes, yes.
Good. Any questions? Yeah.
Oh, so if I've got a tree that's really bowing over,
Yes.
and I do a cut and the growth comes behind it, would that help strengthen that for next year so it doesn't bow so much?
Yep. So what you're attempting to do is you want to retain this branch, right, and probably to here, right, because that'll be like strong. and the end of it is where it droops. And the same will happen for these as well. The ones off the side, you know, they'll be like this, fruit will come on it and they'll go down. So when that happens, behind where that drooping point is, where it gets below the horizontal, like that, there'll be a growth come, normally, okay? What you want to be doing, this is where you recycle your wood. So you would take that off there, right? Okay, and then this one will fruit and eventually it will come down, all right? And the same would happen here. If that was growing off the side of that branch, eventually it will get down below the horizontal, and then you would cut it back so that it just recycles that wood, okay? Grows up, has fruit, falls over, right? Once they get below horizontal, then sap really doesn't push downhill too much.
So that's during winter, when it's
But-
dormant that you do that.
Yep, that
Yep.
would be that, okay? So what you're trying to do is when you make that cut, right, in winter, you'll initiate and it'll go, oh, excellent. So it'll try and push some growth, hopefully, right? And now we're going to select which growth we want, which stuff we don't want, right? Okay? Now when we get there, we'll probably find that the blooming things haven't grown at all, and then I'm just talking a load of bull. But that is normally what happens. If you make a cut, you're going to initiate growth. Okay? So the reason we do it at this time of the year is we don't want to do it when the sap is coming down in the tree. We don't summer prune there. Right? There's a few reasons. One is if there's any disease or a bit of blight, you know, you get that leaf blight on your stone fruit and your plums, and you get that the holes in the leaves and that, and sometimes you'll get the dead wood on the tree as well, just bits and pieces. You try not to remove too much of that at this time, because if you're cutting that out now and then you go and cut another part of the tree, right, then you're going to move it around your tree. So we don't prune when the sap is going this way. Okay? As much as possible. We try not to do that. Otherwise you end up, you know, you're having to sterilise your gear and you're doing all sorts. Okay? Obviously if we've got disease in our tree we need to remove, then we are doing it. But what we do is we bag the stuff and we treat our secateurs. A very, very weak bleach mix, right? Just household bleach, and just wash your secateurs is enough to stop transferring stuff around. You don't need to use really harsh chemicals or anything, right? A bleach, just a small bucket of bleach mixture, water and bleach will solve it for you. Okay? Yeah.
What about all those new runners and bits that come off the rootstock at the bottom? I just get rid of them anytime I see one, but are you meant to be doing that?
Well, if they become a problem, yeah.
Yeah.
Right, but if you started early, you'll find that actually where you've cut one, you've probably got two now.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep, they're a pain, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're getting them when the growth isn't very vigorous, right, a little bit later in the season, right, it's better. Okay. Right.
So
Yep.
the tree, once you take all the fruit off it, and because I noticed that once all the fruit's off the tree, the leaves start to die off,
Yep.
right? So that's sort of like the tree said, oh, I've fulfilled my purpose,
Yep.
I don't have to grow anymore, sort of thing.
Yep.
So in relation to what we're talking about
Yep.
right now,
Yes.
how relevant is that to removing growth from it?
Very. All right.
Because
Not
obviously-
at this time of the year, all right, our tree will be putting its energy into developing fruit. All right. So that's like, for instance, if we're going into a bit of a drought, strange to say here, all right, the tree will sacrifice a lot of other things before it sacrifices the fruit. Okay, so it'll use up all the reserves that are in the leaves and everything, because it's trying to breed. So it tries to hold on to that fruit, because that's its purpose, is to actually breed. We like eating it, but actually it's to produce fruit and seed. Okay, so you're dead right. So once the harvest is over, right, the tree will be go into nascence or into dormancy. That's when it'll start. So we're trying to get summer pruning done prior to that. We want our fruit to ripen, and if they're crowded and shaded, that won't take place. Right? It'll delay it, make it more awkward, and everything else.
Because we've got a tree that's probably it's older than the house, because it'll be 150 years old probably. So the problem with it is well, I've had to, shall we say, remove quite large pieces because it becomes so large you couldn't reach stuff to harvest it. But we've just, some of the fruit was ripening, so the birds were eating it and they were falling off the tree, so we just harvested everything off the tree. But that probably came to something like 80 kgs of fruit.
Wow, nice.
So the thing is now, in the past I haven't known much about pruning, so some of the branches have been removed with chainsaw and stuff like that, because they've been getting into the clothesline and things like that, and trying to shorten a tree so it's not quite so tall, so it's easy to reach everything. But there's massive growth everywhere. It's almost just like a great big shrub.
Looks like a witch's broom standing
It
up.
comes up, the trunk comes up and it has that big branches on it.
So what you've got is everywhere that you've cut it, it's gone like this off the end, and at the top where you went like this, it's now gone like this, and all of those things. This is so if you're doing it, to prune that, you need to do it in winter. Right? We're getting a bit away from what we talked about today, but
sorry.
No, that's all right. So is it how many trunks has it got?
Oh, it's got the major trunk, and then it's got probably 4 big branches that are like.
All going up.
All going up. Like
So
that, up.
so it has a trunk, and then it's got this going on. All right.
That's
Like
about
this.
that sort of thing, and like a hole in the middle.
And then so it's a multi-leader tree, right?
Yep.
Probably won't have that one. It'll have them going something
That's
like
right.
that.
Yep.
And off here you'll have branches, and you won't be able to get a ladder in. It'll be chaos. And in here it'll be dark as.
It's all shaded because of the growth.
So all your fruit around here ripens really well.
And
the stuff in here is as green as grass. Great if you're growing Granny Smiths.
Well, it's
not much good.
It'll be a heritage apple or something.
It will be. Okay. So I got called in and looked after Golden Hills Orchard in Nelson. It's up Golden Hills Road. It's been in family hands since 1908, and they had a lot of trees like that. Okay, and people had pruned them for years. And that was their way of controlling it. The key thing is that you have to have light, right, so that you can harvest fruit. And actually, you don't want to be hurting yourself to get it either. Right? So in circumstances like that, if you cut the top off a tree, right, you'll need to take it to a lateral, something that's fairly flat, right? And then and that's right. Okay, and you'll still get a bit of stuff come off the back, but you'll be able to control that a bit. Okay, you'll need to take the stuff off the inside. Right. And if it's really crowded, I would probably only make one cut with the chainsaw, and it might be that I did that year. Right. So all the calcium in the tree is pretty much stored in the big wood. Okay. Calcium is essential for the storage of your fruit. Right. If you don't have sufficient calcium in, you get that soft, mushy stuff. So you pick it and it's great. You put it away, you put it in a dark place, and you're storing it for winter so that you've got fruit. Then you go to get it and it's pulpy and it's not very nice.
I just thought that was the type of apple.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, it can be. Some of them are quite floury like that. But so calcium's important. If you remove too much calcium from the tree, right, then you're creating all sorts of other problems. So if you like one cut wonder and make the most difference that you can with that cut, and then paint it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
I notice all the big branches are all hollow.
Yeah.
But that's been
Yeah.
been over a long, long period of time.
Yep, that would have rotted,
Yeah, and insects have eaten it
Mm.
all.
Yep. Okay, you've got a mission.
I know.
Yeah, but your ideal tree would be to have these maybe 3 to 4 foot apart, coming off, and they would probably be about this big, coming off flat, and then you'll have little branches off it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look beautiful when you get it right. Okay?
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
I've got a spalud apple tree.
Oh, lovely.
Well, yes, it was going okay. I've got 3 rows of them. I had it 2 years. It's a cooking one. It's peas good and onsite, which and I've got a small section, so I couldn't have a great big tree. So I'm doing it this way.
Are they? So your apple tree is this way?
That's right.
Yeah.
3 lots of that. I've got 3 going across.
Yep.
And last year I had the first lot of apples. I had about 10, and a possum got the whole lot. Oh. I couldn't believe it. They were just all there, and I went out. I hadn't watched for a few days. Went out, and there was 2 left. The next day there was 1. My friend gave me a possum trap, but the possum got in and got the apple without even taking my last apple, without even getting caught. But this year I've only got 2 apples, and I'm still going to get this trap because the people next door to me, which I think a lot of, but they've got it very messy where a possum would love to live. I've pointed it out to them, but it's just a conglomeration of the top one. There's an exact, yes, like that, all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Can't understand.
Yeah.
So should I leave all those bits going up until the winter time to take them off?
How big are they? Are they this big, this big?
They're they're that long.
Yeah, but how big
Just,
around?
yes, about not, yes.
This
'cause
much
it's
or
just a
smaller?
fourth, about that.
Quite whippy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're all up above the fence, which I didn't want.
Yes.
And it didn't do that until this year.
Yeah. So what's happened is your tree has gone into almost what we call biannual bearing every 2nd year.
Really?
So your possum pinched your fruit,
Yes.
right? And that sent the tree, because it wasn't trying to get that fruit through to be ready, right? Okay, pinched the fruit, that released the energy, and the tree went, I've got all this energy, so what am I going to do with it? Then it pushed it all into growth.
I thought it was just trying to tell me, well, I'm not going to give you apples because the possum will just come and pinch them anyway. So.
Yeah. So at this time of year, you could remove most of the stuff that you don't want. Okay.
So cut right down to the.
Yep. Right down to the.
Right down to the.
Yep,
Right.
bang.
Okay.
Okay. Now, if we say we're looking down on it, so it'll be growing off the top of the branch, right?
Yes.
If this is your branch coming, if this is this one coming out the side, this stuff will be coming off the top.
Yes, it
Right.
is.
So when you cut that off, can you see? Okay, I'll make it a bit bigger so people can see. Cut this, all right, and it's got growth like that, and you cut that off, all right. Remove that. You'll have this little bit left around here, okay? When you make the cut, okay?
They go straight up in the air.
Yep.
Whole big row of them, right along.
Yep. So you'll end up with this bit left like that, okay? Here's your trunk, so what will happen, or could happen, all right, is that another one will come out the side of that, okay? All right. What you do is use your thumb and rub it out when it's soft, okay?
So that will happen before winter, even just as soon as the
If it happened, I would be cutting those off now,
cut them off now.
Yep.
Right.
But if it does sprout again, right, rub it out with your thumb. They'll just come
Okay.
straight off, just rub it off.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Righto.
All right?
Thank
You just need to be a little bit vigilant about it, because if they get too woody, then it becomes harder to do, right? And you don't want to be, so if they get too woody, you get another one, and you cut that one off, then you're creating a problem. You've just doubled your problem, because now you've got this one growing, and the cut that you make there is trying to grow as well. Okay. All right. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
rubbing
you're
or
saying
pulling
that
those.
only every second year I'm going to get fruit.
No. If we get control of that growth,
Oh, okay.
right, we
Right.
should be all right. Okay. And it'll take a little bit to get it back.
Okay.
All right. Yes.
Hey Paul, so at the moment cutting inhibits growth,
It should not encourage growth.
yeah, but you wouldn't do like a full bowl shaped cut now, because
No.
that would be too stressful for
No.
the tree. So
Yep.
just kind of light
Yep.
cut.
Just selecting the stuff that we don't want and letting some light in the tree.
Sure.
Yep.
Yep.
Should be quite quick.
Yep.
All right. And err on the side of caution about how much you're taking out of the tree. All right. No. It's hard to put it back. All right. Making sense, sort of?
Yes.
Cool. We'll talk about these, huh? So everyone's got some form of secateurs that they use at home? Well, there's only two types really. So this pair is what we call an anvil. Alright? So if we blow it up, it's got handles, etc. like this. Oh, very poor diagram. So it has handles, and then it has a blade at the end like that, and that shuts. Terrible picture. And that shuts on a flat piece like this. Right? Okay? So the cut is formed when this comes down and it just jams against that surface. Right? Flat, like that. The other type is where the blade, and this is looking end on, goes past a point like that. Alright? So the blade comes down and it shears past it. Goes like this. Okay? That makes sense?
Yeah.
Cool. So you sharpen them differently. So with an anvil, if this is your blade, like this, all right, you create a point on the end, and that point comes down on what we call the anvil, which is this bit here. Okay, so you sharpen both sides of that. All right. If you're using this shear, where it's going past, like this, you know, you're sharpening one side only, and it's flat on this side. Right, so when it goes past this bit, like that, right, it's only cutting on the outside piece, right? And if you take it off the inside as well, right, what will happen is, so if you did this and that, when it goes past, you're creating a gap, right? And then you end up with stringy bits left, you know, when you make a cut and it, oh, flipping heck, it hasn't got right the way through and it's pain. Yeah.
Oh, has that got anything to do with the shape of the blade as
Yeah.
well? Like that looks like a dinosaur head, and then you get the others that look like a kakabeak.
Yep. Do you have your set, please, Jess?
Oh, mine right here.
Yep. So these are sharp. I'll pass them around so you can see it. And they're almost sharp, right? So this is an anvil type, and that shuts like this. Right? So you pass it. Just be careful with them, please. Right?
Okay, so is that
Yeah.
shape always sheer and that one always
Yeah.
angle?
So this one. Put the spring back in for you, Jess. Right? There's a shear, and that's where one goes past the other. Right? Just be careful with them, please.
So you sharpen one like you sharpen a knife,
Yep.
like that, and the other sharpen like a chisel.
Yes. Pretty much.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Now, if we can get out of here without someone cutting themselves, that'll save a whole lot of form filling away. Okay. So, I use a whetstone. I bought a big one because my small one that I normally carry in my pocket, no one would see what you're doing. Okay? So you can buy a small one, which is effectively about half that size, and about half that size, and that will fit in your pocket. So if you're pruning for a living, you know, it's a tool that you have in your belt or in your pouch. So you just give it a quick lick every now and again. All right?
An alternative for a stone, I worked as a boner.
Because people think that they've got to keep doing it for half an hour, and all you're doing is wearing out you're just taking life out of your secateurs. Okay? Alright? So, it's a whetstone, it's mine. You see how much it absorbs? Alright? So, this has been sitting in my shed because from winter, but normally I would soak this, and I do use 3-in-1 oil. Alright? Now with a light, very light, like sewing machine oil, right? Which helps retain moisture and stops from drying out too much. And it is as simple as giving it a rub, right? And I use the stone and hold the secateur. Some people will hold the stone and then move the secateur, right? I always move the stone, right? Simply because that way, if I slip, I'm not going to cut myself. All right? And it is as simple as just giving it a rub. Okay? Now, you'll be able to, with a little bit of practice, you'll be able to work out what angle it is. Because if you're doing this and it's not getting sharp, you probably don't have enough angle on it. Okay? So, right, like that. So somewhere around a 45-degree angle is okay. All right? If you get too steep, all right, then it doesn't cut as well. Okay? What's that? Sorry. 30-degree angle, not a 45. All right? So on this set, you're doing each side of the blade. And it is as simple as this. All right? Okay?
Yeah.
The secret is to do it reasonably frequently, right? That way it saves you trying to get it back from being like really, really blunt.
Sorry, where did you say you got the stone from?
A whetstone, maybe Dyax. The Dyax should have a pruning stone. If not, they should be able to get you one. You don't need something this big.
Yeah, just a small half that.
Yeah, well, it's about right, because these are in good order. I use the smooth side.
Oh, yeah.
Right. If they weren't in good order, I'd use the rough side to get it pretty close and then just polish it off on the other side. Okay? All good? So,
Well, sorry, I'm still a bit confused about how to do the shear.
right. On the shear, oh, right? I'll come and get them. Right. So on the shear, we do not do the side that goes past this. All right. So we're only doing, right, this outside. All right. All right. So we're just doing this outside like this. Okay. And you'll see the bright mark when you polish, when you sharpen it. So it'll go away from being flat, and you'll end up and you'll see new steel there. All right? And Jess won't know herself shortly.
Oh, they're my old ones.
Yeah.
Very old ones.
Yeah. Okay. So now, I'll tell you now. So sometimes when you do that, it creates what we call a feather, right, on the back side. So just hold it flat and just go like that, and that takes that off the back side. All right, and suddenly it becomes very sharp. Okay. All right, you'd know that being in the
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So when you're pushing like this and you're pushing away from you, some of the material you're taking just burrs across to the inside, and you just go like that, and then next minute, sharp. Alright? All good? Now the same thing applies for loppers. Alright? So there's really only two types of loppers as well. So yeah, so the same sort of sharpening principles apply for that. There's nothing worse than having a pair of loppers and you cut something and then you think, oh, that'll be good, and then there's still a bit of bark and then hanging on the flipping thing, and then it tears, and then you go, what do I do with that? Next time you go out, it's got a black stain on it because bugs, fungus or something's got in it as well. Right? So we'll be doing a winter pruning this year again, like this. So we'll go through the winter pruning exercise and how we look. So there's a few things you can do. So this is just a wax-based pruning paste. Okay. So if something's broken in the tree, even at this time of year, we just need to remove it with a clean cut. Okay. You need to put something to protect the tree on it. Okay. And this is just an organic tree pruning paste. Okay. This works well. Okay. The other thing I do is I use actually a latex or a water-based paint. Like it. It's normally Mission Brown, because it hides. Right? And I paint them, especially anything over about half an inch or 10 or 12 mil. Anything bigger than that, I would just dab and paint.
So anything smaller you wouldn't
No.
bother?
No, wouldn't normally worry about it. Okay. The other thing that happens with that is if there is a bit of disease, and especially in older trees, you get the odd bit of dieback and things happening in the tree. What I would do is, does anyone use copper as a natural spray or anything?
Well, Cuprox
Yeah.
or fungal
Yep.
protection.
Yep, something like that. What I do is I'll mix up in a bottle this big, right, some paint, and I'll put some copper in with it because it's water-based, the paint is, right, and that also helps to protect and stop the transmission.
How much copper would you put in it?
In something this size, quarter of a teaspoon,
Oh yeah.
right? No more than that. That's pretty strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Especially if there's disease in the tree. Right. Alright. Now, copper's really toxic. It's one of the most toxic substances to man. So you need to be careful when you're handling it. Or don't handle it really. Make sure that you've got things in place. And we talk about organics and not using synthetic insecticides and everything else. Right? One of the most toxic insecticides is actually nicotine sulfate, which is an organic compound. Yeah. So just because it's organic doesn't mean it's safe for us to use. So you need to take precautions and make sure you read labels. All right. Cool. Right. Questions, team? Yes.
So I'm developing a forest garden, so I want to plant vegetables under the
Yep. So you want to put an understory in?
anything for pruning trees to control the height and the
Yep.
shape, the size.
Yep. Right. So we'll go back. This is more a winter pruning exercise. Okay. So if your tree has one trunk, right? Right. And we have branches like this, right? Perfect tree. Everybody's got one in a book somewhere. All right. So if we're doing that, and we wish to control the height in a tree, right? We will be looking for a small growth, and normally get it that's coming off here, right? And it will have a bud at the end, all right? We call this, it'll be what an apical bud. And we would cut or lower down to always to a bud. So we will have a bud that is the highest point in the tree, and that exerts some dominance over the growth in the tree. If you just go like that, then you'll end up with all over the tree. Okay? Right? Now, well, it sounds like it works all the time. We're dealing with nature, so we're endeavouring to do the best that we can. So, if you're talking about how do you control the width at the bottom, right? So when these have fruit and they go like this, right? You cut to something that's coming behind. When branches start hanging down, right? Generally you will find new growth comes from on this bend here somewhere, right? Now, that stretches the bark and it seems that it wants to pop out there, right? So you leave one in, leave that in while it's got fruit on it, and then when this starts to have fruit and starts to come down, you take this off in winter, right? This is gone, right? And then this will then end up down there, right? In about 3 or 4 years time that'll end up down there, and then you go, you're looking for something coming from behind, and then you go bang, cut it and recycle.
There must be some natural evolution in there. That's the bit that my sheep naturally prune for me.
Yeah. All right. So, does that make sense? Yeah.
Oh, trying to keep it simple because simple person. Would you say it's kind of like leading the sap to the bud?
Yeah. This does. Yes.
It like that top one, or yeah.
Up here you're talking about?
Yeah. So you're
right.
allowing the sap to go to a bud.
Yeah. Don't cut to a blind cut.
Okay.
If you just cut it off, right, it'll just go. All right.
Follow the bud.
Yeah. So if you look around, once you've done a bit of this, and you're driving around, you go, oh, they got that wrong. Okay. All right. Yes.
Well, what happens if you lock that drooping branch off in summer now?
Here.
Yeah. You might not get that.
Yeah, I think.
Growth.
Yeah, I don't think you'll get the push behind. You won't get it now.
Sure.
All right. Okay. If it was in summer, probably if this was in the weeds and on the dirt, right, and in the ground, I'd cut it here, but I wouldn't come back to here. I'd lift it up to somewhere where it's easy to get at and not a nuisance to you, right? If you're mowing under your trees and things like that, you don't want it on the ground. Okay. But I'd prefer that we made this sort of structural cut in winter. Don't really want to be cutting things off this big in summer at all. Only if you're trying to preserve the tree, if something's broken or something like that. Okay?
What about weeping trees? Like, I'm not talking about the fruit tree, but like weeping prunices and miniature ones and things that do weep.
Yeah. You want that to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they'll have this going on as well.
Yeah, okay.
You know, when you see it, they get down and they get down and they get down, and then something comes off the back of them.
Right.
In general, right? Because there's some really nice trees, and that's how they lift. We call it lifting the skirts, actually.
Yeah.
So you lift the skirts up, so that you can walk around and you can work underneath it, right? And you'll come to something that's flat, right? And you don't have to do that very often either,
Right.
because that growth that takes place on those weeping trees is quite slow, right? It's just because the sap's down here.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you cut it off up here though, then suddenly
Okay.
you'll have that problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, same thing.
Yeah. Right. So once we understand that, you know, it's a normal cyclical thing, the branch hangs down, we take the fruit off it, and then we lift the skirt or we trim back. And then we recycle that 3 or 4 years' time. Well, that'll get down and then we'll take that off. We're looking for new growth. Right? Yeah.
Does the size of the apple, as like just because of the variety, or is there a way you can increase the size of your apples? Because I've got some old apple trees, but they're all really, really like tiny wee apples.
Has it got lots of them?
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you think that's just the kind of it?
Well, you can, right.
Or is there a way
So-
you can make the apple grow bigger?
Yeah, so in the commercial sense, right, we're thin apples, right? So the tree will only support so many. Now, what you're saying is dead right. So some are will only ever develop. That might be the largest the apple's ever going to grow.
Yeah.
But if you've got, you know, like 300 apples on a tree,
Yeah.
right? Actually, if you had 100, a lot of that energy would then be going into.
So you mean like removing some of the small, like
Yep.
herbicide or whatever, and then that would allow space
Yep.
to grow.
So if you think about when flowering takes place in fruit set, so you can see that fruit's on the tree, right? Most of them will have what we call a natural shed. So not every flower will set. Okay? And those that don't fall off, if you give them a bit of a flick with your hand, 2 or 3 might fall off. Right? So if you think about your tree, you could end up with like 500 or 1,000 apples on your tree. You've probably got like 5,000 apples on it.
I actually thinned the fruit out 3/4 of the tree, and I got probably 2 or 3 20-litre pails of apples that I took off of the tree before I ended up with what I got.
Yep.
So one part of the tree had
Big
apples
apples.
up to this sort of size, and the other one had just all really small ones because it hadn't been thinned out.
Okay.
But I also read that if you do that, it reduces the stress on the tree, which will help maintain you getting the same good harvest of fruit season after season.
Yep.
So is there a time that you meant to remove those?
I would normally do it 4 to 6 weeks after fruit set.
Yeah.
Okay.
So once they start, yeah.
Yep. So you want to be taking them before they're this big. Okay. Alright. Makes sense?
Next year.
Yeah. And one of the other things that happens is, you know, if you're you get bunches of apples, you know, and they're all touching, and then you get caterpillars and stuff behind it all, and it gets manky and that. So quite often, in a commercial sense, we'll thin to singles, lots of them. But we don't get to buy that fruit in New Zealand.
No flat apples.
Pardon?
No flat apples.
No, not the flat side. Yeah, but you know, we don't get the export this round perfectly shaped apple very much to purchase. We can't afford them.
Are there any major differences between, you know, the summer pruning with, you know, stone pit fruit and nuts, hazelnuts?
Yeah, there's a lot,
Yeah.
but we don't have time today.
Okay, cool.
Okay. But the same principles apply about light. Right. If the tree's all full of growth and everything, then you're going to end up with disease and it hosts things, and it's not that great. It gets wet and gets manky. Well, it'd be nice if it got wet at the moment. Right. So you want the tree to have light. Light's one of the best fungicides that we have. Light and sunshine. Best way of getting rid of fungus. So if your tree open so that that's not taking place. If your tree's open, you won't end up with lichen and things all over it either, except maybe on the south side. Alright. What are we going to do now, Jess?
Oh, we'll head off down to the orchard at the corner of Manx and Ness Street. Just down Optica Street.
What I didn't talk about was the difference between spur-bearing varieties and tip-bearing varieties. So this is predominantly a spur-bearing variety, so they're held tightly and they don't throw a lot of lateral growth out. Okay, you can see it's pushed some off with a bit of wind, and you can see where those have come from, the size of the fruit that's around it. So that's it's naturally thinned itself, and it's got some quite good size there. All right. So that none of these are sprayed.
No.
Okay. So the fruit's particularly clean, so that it's not sprayed for black spot or anything. So they're doing really, really well. Right? So at this time of the year, we would not do a thing to that tree. Right? We just leave it alone at the moment. In winter, we might make a decision about what we're going to do with this, and then try and push growth into this one. As soon as we cut that off there, this tree's going to go. Right? Because we're releasing that energy and it's all coming into one. Okay. Right.
So if you wanted to keep that tree short,
like not too tall,
Yep.
would you keep the second growth on it?
No.
No, you'd still take it off. Oh, yeah.
It's just, it's really down low.
Quite low.
Yeah. And I'm old. So I like fruit that
Don't
I
want to
can.
bend.
I like fruit that I can pick.
Yeah.
You know, and also, if I'm working underneath it, I haven't got a lot of protection on top, so there's no early warning device that I'm about to take skin off.
How old is that tree? This one?
This one?
Yeah.
Jess, what is it? 4?
Sorry?
How old is this tree?
Oh, it's not very old. It was donated to us, so it's probably about 3 years old.
Wow, 3 years old. Right.
Yeah, so the nature of the tree is not that vigorous.
And I've got
It's-
a funny feeling it's a dwarf.
It's
Yeah.
that's what I was saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whether it's on vigorous rootstock or not.
Yeah.
So does everybody understand grafted trees? Right. So trees are grafted for variety, and they are on a rootstock. They can be anything from a dwarf rootstock, which keeps the tree really small and compact, right, to something that is quite vigorous. The vigorous rootstocks, things like M793, are for really poor ground. All right. If you put something like a vigorous rootstock into really good ground, good luck, right? Because you're going to be using one of these an awful lot. Okay. So we have a rootstock variety M106, which is a moderate growth, which grows okay in good soils. All right. And that'll give you a moderate sized tree in good soil. In poor soils, you'll use a 793 type of rootstock, which is far more vigorous. All right? So you end up with a decent sized tree without it going berserk. Get it wrong, you've got problems. All right? So the nurserymen around here will give you the right stuff. You just need to give them the information. Hey, I've got a really nice, loamy, fertile bit of ground and I want to put a fruit tree in it. They go, yeah, right, we'll give you a semi-dwarf or something like that. Something you can look after without it taking over your entire backyard. Okay? All right? So we have a tree, a plum tree that's got no fruit on it this year.
No fruit.
So, didn't see it, so I don't know if it got frosted in full bloom. Right? Or snowed or hailed or whatever, because it can be that simple. Hasn't thrown an awful lot of vigorous growth, so I don't think it was the previous year's pruning that's caused it not to bear fruit this year. So there's something else going on. Okay, so those are the things to be mindful about. So your tree this year may have got right in flowering, or when the fruit set was on, we might have had some heavy frost, which could have affected how much fruit it's holding. Okay? Yeah.
Diary.
It's not always because we've done something wrong.
Yes.
Okay? Right. So if we take lovely blackwood real on it, what would I do with it at this time of the year? Nothing. Right? This has been here for a while. I don't really want to transfer that around the tree. Okay? We'll deal with that in a minute. It's quite stable. It hasn't moved into these lateral branches or anything like that. And if you want to be really pedantic about it, you could go through and remove it all at this time. All right? But it's really time consuming. All right? And it's not doing anything to the tree currently. All right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. I would then, you see how that's brown? All right. So that's why I'm not too keen on doing too much with it at the moment. And then I bag this. All right. And there's quite a bit on this tree. It's not uncommon to see this in stone fruit in Southend. Yeah. Okay. It's not uncommon to see it anywhere, but it's not uncommon to see it. Okay. Right.
So you actually getting rid of that? So you wouldn't mulch that or anything to use it, or you just?
I'd just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Bag it so it doesn't do anything and put it in your rubbish. demonstration because you can't see anything really. No. This tree's under quite good control, growth-wise, so there's nothing that's really going berserk in this tree. Notice that? All this growth, even the new growth, is quite controlled. This is all this season's growth here. All right. It's not detrimental to the tree. There's no fruit in here that I really need to be making decisions about whether or not it's going to get light. In winter, we will prune this differently and we will space branches out, right, so that there's more gap between them, right, and that'll resolve this issue. Wouldn't do it now, no need. All right.
So there's enough light getting through to the fruit, so you wouldn't worry about thinning the middle.
If you notice, if you have a look, all the fruit's around the outside of the tree. Oop. Yeah. All right.
There's a lot of little spindly bits in there.
Yeah. So all the fruit's around the perimeter of the tree, and that's because that's where the light is. Okay. So we've talked about what's going on with this tree. So it's got no fruit this season, and it hasn't got a lot of growth going on either. You know, there's little bits of growth, but this tree's actually in quite good order. All right. There's a little bit of stuff to come out in winter. If you come back in winter, we'll deal with that one, and you'll see what it does. All right. So the growth is around the outside. We could get rid of some of this downward facing stuff that's just in the way. Alright, I'm always loath to do too much. So the whole point of summer pruning is for the improvement in the tree. See this bit of growth? Alright, and these are fruit buds for next year. So this will be a fruit here next year. Alright. It's a little bit, it's not the easiest of trees to see. If we take this branch, here's a good example. So this is sitting here, it's quite flat at the moment. You know, we talked about what happens when this hangs down. So if this hung down like this, here's your replacement branch in a year or so's time. Alright, you know how we said when one hangs down, you've got the other one coming off the back of it. So that would be that one. Okay? Yeah, I would, not now. Right? And I wouldn't this year because this didn't have fruit. I would actually leave this for another year, right, and get fruit off both because I'm greedy. Alright?
What is the fruit? You said the fruit nodule or whatever. What is it look like?
The fruit buds.
Yeah, fruit buds.
Right.
Yeah, how do you know?
How do we tell? Right. Growth buds lie flat against the branch. All right. Fruit buds pop out and are more pronounced, all right, and fat. All right. This is about the only time you can fat shame something, right? That's that time. Okay. All right. So you can see, come up and you'll be able to see this. These are vegetative buds here, all right, because they're lying flat against the flat there. Okay. And when we get fruit buds, all right, they are more pronounced and they then fatten up. Right. And we'll just knock a couple off. All right. So there's a bit too much going on in here, and we have growth coming off the back. This is this season's growth, so that's shading and it's off the top. So we will take that out. Take that out. And see how that's getting quite large at the end, right, compared with the other ones that are around it, and it's off the top. Right, gone. Just like that. So it's a little bit more light into the tree. Right. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Right. I know it's pretty hard when you're sitting around the table talking, but when you get to come and you get to see what the intention is and how we do that. So these trees are in pretty good order. Okay. Right. Okay. So in the middle there's very little fruit, and it's actually quite a bit of growth in there. Right. You have, so I'll try not to knock fruit off. So in here, right, there's not very much fruit, and there's lots of growth and shading. That's why there's no fruit here. Okay? And the fruit is more around. It's quite well spread though. So in winter we would open this up, this gap, and take some of this out of here to let more light in. Alright? Okay? Jess isn't watching too much, so I'll do it now.
So Paul, you usually only cut new growth, but you only cut this year's growth summer pruning?
No.
No, you can cut.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and if you did that a little bit further up, right, in winter, and then you'll get light coming in here. Ideally, you want your fruit so that you can reach it from the ground, because no one likes standing on a ladder or standing on a chair trying to get the flipping best apple in the tree. It's always the one that you can't quite reach. Yeah? You'll notice that there's lots of understory stuff planted here as well. Right. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Jess?
Yeah, we've got comfrey, which we've got to chop and drop. We usually sow a lot of wildflower seeds. The California poppy seem to be the survivors. And we've got South Zone pumpkin over there. We've got currant bushes and gooseberry. And we've got potatoes that we never quite get rid of. And we've started a compost heap underneath. There's potatoes growing in there. And there's the odd sunflower that's popped up as well. We usually get Aurora to help us for about 6 weeks in the middle of winter. So they come and take everything out. And then we make a big pile under the trees. We don't chuck it away, and it'll rot down eventually. And we've just got to feed with manure. We've got a heap of horse manure. We've got a bag up, and we feed it. Keep feeding. Especially the comfrey's really good, and you can make a tea out of the comfrey as well.
So with the comfrey, if you've got like a drum, right, then I tend to use rainwater if I can collect it, right? Put water in, and then I'll take that comfrey and I'll what we call steeping it. So I'll just put it in, not too much, just put it in and give it a plunge every now to give it a bit of a stir up, right? Can get a bit pongy, but if you haven't got too much in there, and then you use the water as a tonic, right? Because it's really high in nutrients when you do that, and it's easier to handle. Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the comfrey as well. I use comfrey a lot. Can you put the seeds in the drum of water or not?
Yeah.
I just put everything in.
Yeah.
Okay.
They will go back to the ghost.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just worried about it sprouting everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And you need to leave it to steep for quite a while.
Yeah, I've got 100-year one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep adding.
Yeah. And it's pretty good.
Yeah.
And every now and again you need to de-sludge the bottom of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right.
So when you say leave it for a long time, how long would you?
I would be collecting during the growing season, right, and just keep putting it. And I'd be using it probably next spring.
Okay.
Right, as a tonic then.
Yeah.
Right, or in the summer if you see that the trees are under a reasonable amount of stress. So when you're putting anything around, you always put it around the drip line. And the drip line is the perimeter around the outside of the tree. So that's where the feeder roots are. Okay? So all the little fibrous roots that feed your tree are not in by the trunk. They're generally around the outside where the drip line of the tree is. Right? So if you took a line around the perimeter of your tree, that's where you sort of put stuff like that. Same if you're using blood and bone and any fertilisers like that. Alright? Any questions?
Just a quick one. Now if you see this one is going about the ladder height, how would you trim it? Would you just go and trim the tip, or just go and how would you reduce the growth?
Yeah.
On top.
So we'll do this in winter, right? And it is, like they're saying, a little bit out of control. Right? And we'll just have a look, see if we can work out why. Right, if you've got these trees, you need to be aware that they have really sharp spines on them too, right? And they hurt, all right? And I've got no gloves. So one of the reasons this tree looks like this, and you're welcome to have a look around, is it doesn't actually have a head in the tree, like the apical dominance. So there are lots of things in this tree that are all the same height. So it is not a tree, it's actually, at the moment, it is a bush. All right? So in winter we will need to start the process of turning it into a tree. I wouldn't do it in 1 year, okay? Because it would be taking too much wood out of the tree. Okay, ideally you would not have it so it got to this stage, but I can see that it has had a couple of things broken, and that is why it has ended up like this. Okay, can everybody see this tree?
Yeah.
Right. Look at it.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, isn't it? All right. So here's a perfect example of what we would do now, right? Because the wind has broken this out. See this?
Oh yeah.
Right? This whole branch, which is loaded with apples, right, has broken out. Right? And if we look, you'll see that we have this, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4 things all the same size, all covered in apples.
Yep.
Right? Ideally, you would not let this happen. All right? Okay. So this is where you're pruning over a period of time will hold strength in the tree. Right? And you won't allow the tree to overload itself. Okay? So at the time it should perhaps only have 1 or 2 of these, and then this would probably not have broken. Okay? Because I'm greedy and it still has a good cambium layer on the bottom, right? I would leave this just because I can, right? And harvest the fruit when they ripen. Okay? Otherwise I would cut it off now. Right? I'll do it anyway. Right? I'm loath to really, I like the fruit. No, I'm going to leave it. Right? We'll save the fruit and we'll eat the fruit. Okay? But you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. So we've got 3 here the same size almost. Right? And that is what's caused that. That's like your tree, you know, in the photo? Yeah, where you've got the 3 the same size. Yeah. So if they all had fruit, that might happen to your trunk. Bang. Yeah, and then you lose your tree.
So the apical tip is never cut. It keeps growing.
No, it is the blind bud.
The blind bud, so you can direct it to.
No, it won't grow. It'll just stay in the tree.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. It's not a growth bud.
Okay.
All right. It's a terminal bud.
It just stays there. Okay.
Okay. Right. Right. Don't really want to touch that.
No, don't.
For winter.
Because then we've got to get rid of it, and it's not the greatest. What we could do is we'll come back here after, in the winter and we'll prune that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then you'll see what can happen to that tree. All right? If you've got a camera, take a picture of it now. Yeah. Right? Then you'll go, what the flipping heck are you going to do with that? And then in winter we'll prune it, and you'll be able to see what to do, hopefully. And then the following year, we will see if it's worked. Right?
Yeah.
So that's got no fruit on it because it's overcrowded.
Yeah, it's just everything. It's got far too much growth and everything's going on with it. So it's interesting that they both haven't fruited.
Yeah.
So it may have been, like I said, a heavy frost at that time of the year when the fruit set was on.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're treated differently, they're not the same. They don't have, the other tree doesn't have this sort of growth going on in it, and it still doesn't have fruit.
Because that one did fruit the year before.
Yeah.
But yeah, the other one's still out.
All right. Cool.